the rise and the purpose of the lone wolf archetype. So let's talk about the lone wolf archetype, as this is something I could highly identify myself with. And this is now on a completely uprise, where a very small portion of people are so incredible attached to their own solitudes because they believe they have a very important role to fulfill in society, that actually really no one around them can really fully truly understand. But even the lone wolf himself or herself cannot really fully understand, stand under this so-called purpose. So what exactly is the lone wolf? The lone wolf, perhaps you could identify as, you know, the Sigma kind of male archetype. Of course, there are also Sigma females. But compared to the Sigma or to an alpha kind of male archetype, perhaps the alpha is much more about external validation, success, fame, recognition, status, external appearance and all of that. They are more of the loud kind of individual. The Sigma, he's more about solitude. But why is this solitude so important to him? And this is exactly what we are going to figure out in this video. The purpose of a lone wolf is that of closing down family generational trauma, patterns that has basically been passed over. They do not fit into the matrix kind of model of how society is really being structured. Like, okay, so this is what we have normalized, like this is how your life has to be. Like you go to school, you go to college, you go to university, you get some nice fancy degrees, you find yourself in some kind of corporate role, and then eventually you can go and buy your house, you can have a family, start your family and reproduce yourself, and you'll have a happy life. Now, the role of the lone wolf doesn't really look like that. They do not fit in the standard, normalized way we have structured society. The lone wolf, he really craves for a whole different way of independence for themselves. Now, why is that? Let's say within the mother line, the mother, she did not get any daughters, perhaps only sons. If the mother would get a daughter, the female line would have reproduced itself. The line would have continued, because a mother, because of a daughter, when a woman grows old, of course she can bear children. Me as a man, we cannot do that. So when a mother only had like a son, her female line would basically be ended, that's it. For that reason, the male would probably see himself as the black sheep of the family. The weird one, the person that does not fit in, the dreamy kind of person, who does not really want to obey rules and regulations, who is rebellious against authority, starts maybe in younger years as a child, who does not want to take things for granted. When the parents had to say, okay, so these are the rules of our household, you better start obeying. The rebel starts to rise. Then going into school, the rebel starts to grow even further and higher. Perhaps signs of aggression and pushing against the system, who cannot really fit into the normal mundane. Maybe he becomes really highly independent, maybe also because of the household structure. Maybe the family fell apart, maybe through divorce or whatever. Maybe a family member passed away. He only grew up with maybe one parent and it was a completely out of balance kind of situation. And maybe the lone wolf, he had to learn to become highly hyper independent. And through this independence, he created a coping mechanism to basically to stand on his own feet. Then there will also be like a lower sense of trust towards others, because other people could, you know, perhaps cause pain or harm your trust. And because of that, he builds walls. Walls to protect himself for not getting hurt. Yes, he could be very loyal, but only when a certain level of trust has been established. He would rather live in his own way, create a high level of independence, because that's really how he had to survive in the world. But looking within his solitude, he could actually be able to contemplate on life circumstances and situations and events. He would rather not fall in the trap of social validation. Yes, you could have like lots of a social circle and friends around you. If I look back to my own kind of childhoods, I had always have a lot of social interactions and social things going on, social events, groups I was hanging out with. But still I felt like a loneliness within me that actually I craved more for solitude, because within my solitude I would be able to contemplate more of what's happening within my own mind and spirit. Because I had to understand really like what is going on here. And within the solitude we will be able to tune in more into our instincts and intuition and develop a relationship with our higher self. Now you could say this solitude could be like a coping mechanism because of traumatic experiences. When traumatic experiences have occurred, we start to isolate ourselves. Because of that could be a response to that as well. But if we start to look further and deeper into that, this is also what is needed to develop our intuitive gifts within ourselves. Is to relax our mind, because through relaxation we will be able to self-reflect, and through self-reflection we will be able to grow. Now, how more we align with the kind of lone wolf kind of archetype, yes, we will be able to develop our instincts and intuition, and we would be able to develop higher sense of empathy, compassion, because that's really like our gifts we are nurturing. But like I also have mentioned in my video about the spirit wolf, or the wolf as your power animal, because this is also really what it refers to. If we are only within our solitude, the solitude has of course like a double-edged sword, that we must be very cautious that we don't lose ourselves completely within the need for solitude and independence. Because eventually we would be able to get to a position of being an advisor, a consultant, a coach, a mentor, a healer, who have a high level of understanding of how life and human nature actually works, because that's really what this archetype also kind of really what refers to. But then we also must kind of like come down to our mountain and start running, of course, within the valley where the majority of people are at. Because also when we come down from this mountain and we surround ourselves with the majority of people in this world, we can step into a room and we can already sense the energy of the room. We can feel exactly what's going on, and within our way of observing people's behavior, we could actually feel exactly what's happening in someone's energy field, what's going on in their mind, their body language, the way they speak, what they say, how they say it, or what they don't say. We pick up on so many signals. And then we really must come again back to our own center, because of course when you have this incredible level of empathy, we must be cautious for that as well, is that when we don't pick up enough things from someone else, that it could drain us. So this increased sensitivity is of course very powerful, but we must be cautious of it as well for us to nurture that. Another thing is of course like we are working through all these generational patterns and traumatic experiences that has been passed over from generation to generation to generation, we are the ones that are cutting cords, literally, with all these energy bonds and vows and all of it. That of course we are up to a very challenging task within this lifetime. I also have mentioned that within the life path number 9, the last number in numerology, and if you are on this life path as a lone wolf, then of course you could really recognize the kind of work that you are up against. Climbing the pyramid of Maslow, the hierarchy of self-actualization. Now another thing is, of course, when we are climbing this mountain of the higher self, because we already have experienced what it is like to be like an alpha kind of person, of going after the ego and the external validation, it can't really satisfy us. We could also say is that chasing money for the sake of chasing money, so we can have like more power, status, success, it doesn't really do that much for us anymore. We feel we have a more important task to fulfill, but you know, we can all recognize it is still very important in order to feel somewhat grounded in this world. And then you could say like, okay, so maybe we must really nurture our leadership capabilities and see like, okay, so what are the demands of today's modern day world and how we can step more into a management role or leadership role and basically systemize everything, automate everything, and then outsource it and then scale it and let someone else do the work, because we already kind of like understand how things are working. We are just no operators, basically. We don't really like to do things all by ourselves, the nitty-gritty kind of detailed orientated things. We are more like the visionaries, the creative individuals who come up with ideas, who create strategies, for example. Once again, we are the advisors, the consultants, the mentors, the coaches, the healers of the modern day world. So then of course, our primary purpose is that of going through our generational kind of things. And then of course we have a secondary purpose, like how can we bring that into the world? And then that what needs to be done, how can we automate it, systemize it, outsource it, so we don't have to deal with the nitty-gritty kind of things. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. Could you relate to any of the lone wolf kind of archetype? What it is that you are dealing with, what it is that you are working through. And then of course, like I also have this community, Soul Tribe for Men, the Wolf Pack. This is where the lone wolf can come into a pack of wolf, where we can start building relationships with each others, because one other practice that we must nurture, and that's really like developing a healthy sense of masculinity, which is the practice and building containment. Like once again, we are providers, but what we can provide is a whole new base of providing containments, both for our brothers, for our sisters, and for the woman that we love in our life. So there's a whole other aspect to it as well, because we live in a society that is degrading itself in materialism and consumerism, where people only start to use each other for either for lust or for status. But to evolve, really, we must really develop a level of how can we provide containment for each other, so the other can also somewhat express itself in the most authentic way, and that's why the other person also must feel safe and secure. So people can start to trust us, because I think that's also what we can provide, is of course building a level of trust and loyalty towards each other. So I think that's also kind of really is very important within the lone wolf kind of archetype. But that is once again, that also really starts with us as building a base within ourselves, feeling more grounded, integrated and embodied. Embody both our lower self, the shadow aspects, because how further our roots can ground themselves in our shadow, how further the branches of our tree of life, of consciousness, can reach up. So above, so below, so within, so without. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in one of my next videos. Take care for now.